An early version of this presentation was originally given at ERC, the Electronics Reuse Conference. I really recommend going to ERC if you're interested in any aspect of repair, refurbishing, or reuse. Anyway, I'm John, and I'm a MacBook refurbisher who got kicked off the Amazon Marketplace last year along with many others. I'm here to tell you about that experience, what has happened since, and what could happen next. I've been in business for almost 12 years. I was in the corporate world for 14 years previously, and when I found repair and refurbishing, it felt like a new lease on life. The independence of being a small business owner, for me, was the only way to go, and I've promoted the benefits of small business by acting as a mentor to dozens of others. In the beginning, the possibilities seemed limitless. Apple has never made our lives easy as refurbishers, but there were relatively few industry obstacles at the time. One of the most invasive threats was Apple's use of proprietary tri-wing screws. Think of that compared to everything we deal with now, one of the biggest threats being the need for a special $5 screwdriver. Times have definitely changed. Long story short, I refurbished laptops I bought by the hundreds from recyclers. I discovered the benefits of selling in bulk, and I found a home selling MacBooks wholesale for most of 10 years. Then, several years ago, one of my customers asked me to ship laptops to something called Amazon Fulfillment instead of to him directly. I'd long considered myself strictly a wholesaler, but this made me think, if my customer is never even seeing the product, yet he's making a profit, then why am I not just selling on Amazon myself? I thought I'd give it a shot. Amazon was addictive, and I made great money. On Amazon, you don't have to create listings like you do on eBay, but instead you tag on to existing listings, so it only took minutes to list all the MacBooks I knew I could build. Every morning I woke up to a pile of orders that were 40% more profitable than my wholesale prices. Amazon was a tricky game to play, and ruthless to those who failed to adapt to its rules, but I got good at it, and to this day my now useless account has perfect feedback. Over a few months I shifted from 100% wholesale to 50% Amazon. So things were good, but fast forward 3 years to November 2018 when I woke up to this email. Dear seller, Amazon is constantly working to enhance the customer experience, and one of the ways we do this is by increasing selection of the products we know customers want. As part of a new agreement with Apple, we are working with a select group of authorized resellers to offer an expanded selection of Apple and Beats products, including new releases in Amazon stores. You are receiving this message because you are currently selling or have previously sold Apple or Beats products. Your existing offers for those products will soon be removed from Amazon's online store in the United States. Please contact Apple if you would like to apply to become an authorized reseller on Amazon. Thank you for selling on Amazon. Amazon Services. My first thought was, oh well, that's too bad. It was a good run, after all. And hey, they're giving us until January 4th, so that's nice of them, right? But as my coffee sunk in, I started to think more clearly, and I wondered, can they really do that? Can Amazon make a deal with Apple to dump its marketplace sellers just like that? And I had another thought. This is news. I contacted Jason Kebler, the Vice reporter who has dedicated years to repair, and within hours an article was published. The whirlwind of activity that ensued confirmed that, yes, this was news. A dozen articles and interviews happened over a few weeks, from the LA Times to NPR, to PC Magazine, to Louis Rossmann, to Nikkei in Japan. It should be noted that Amazon didn't cut off everyone. They announced that Apple sellers could keep selling by applying for the Renewed program. But the requirements for Renewed is to show receipts for 2.5 million of Apple inventory from approved suppliers in the previous quarter. $10 million in inventory per year. That's not $10 million sales, that's $10 million inventory. That's not small business, that's big business. That requirement clearly precludes the vast majority of repair, refurbishing, and recycling businesses from selling Apple products on Amazon. Discussions started on Amazon seller message boards, but most were deleted by moderators. A dedicated Facebook group arose, and a small coalition of affected sellers was built. People were in shock. Many had gone all in with Amazon. And why wouldn't they? They got the best prices and products sold very quickly on the biggest marketplace in the world. Contemplating life without it, many faced an existential crisis. I published a letter to Jeff Bezos trying to remind him what it was like to sell books out of his garage. That prompted more publicity and caused an Amazon employee named Reginald to contact me and tell me that Jeff had read my letter. "We're taking your feedback about our restriction of Apple products under consideration," he wrote. This felt like a victory until I realized it was probably just a PR stunt. I tried to keep in touch with Reginald, but he hasn't been very helpful. I guess I'm supposed to be satisfied with quote-unquote consideration. Dozens reached out to me during this period of time. Lots of other affected sellers. many who had been suddenly banned from selling Apple on the Walmart marketplace, prompting suspicion that Apple and Walmart had a similar agreement. Some businesses claimed they couldn't sell because of the Amazon Brand Registry, an anti-counterfeiting program that some say oversteps its bounds and allows manufacturers to eliminate competition. I offered advice and routed everyone to proper channels, and it became a part-time job putting people in touch with reporters and resources. On the morning of January 4th, 2019, that fateful day, things seemed normal. We wondered if maybe it wasn't going to happen. Amazon's only acknowledgement of the change was the November email, and Amazon is known for cryptic and erroneous communications, so maybe all the panic was for nothing. But sure enough, one by one, we watched our inventories reduced to zero. We watched as some invisible hand behind the scenes took action, and by that night it was done. The only Apple listings left were renewed listings. Renewed sellers got thrown a life preserver, and everyone else drowned. It ended with a whimper, not a bang. Unlike end-user-facing businesses, which often promote awareness of themselves by advertising, refurbishers tend to be lower profile, and so the general public barely noticed the change. Some sellers threw in the towel, some changed careers, some got a part-time job to supplement the loss. Repair and refurbishing have been subject to many blows, and it's been a death by 1,000 cuts. For some, this was one cut too many. I mostly went back to wholesale. I tried other marketplaces, but the glut of ex-Amazon sellers increased competition and caused prices to fall. Studies show that Amazon is literally half the marketplace of all things sold online, so even refurbishers that weren't selling on Amazon were only a degree of separation away, and the shockwaves were felt by most everyone. I was happy to have been an activist for the cause, but it felt like the fight was probably over. But then, out of nowhere, the Federal Trade Commission contacted me. They'd read a Verge article. A universe of possibilities opened up. The FTC Tech Task Force had formed and was looking for new initiatives. It was investigating the Amazon-Apple deal. I did a phone interview with 7 lawyers and an economist. Clearly they were trying to establish that damage had occurred. Their questions made it clear that many topics were on the radar, not just the Apple deal. They gave few clues about strategy, although they did want to know if I would sell on Amazon again should fees increase. I asked if I should publicize the investigation, and they said they couldn't answer that question, but they also said I was not obligated to keep quiet. I didn't know what to do. I decided to wait and let them do their work. I didn't want to complicate the investigation. But a few weeks later, a public FTC event took place. From what I could tell, there wasn't mention of the Amazon deal, and that made me restless. What if instead of going public, the investigation fizzled out? I felt like I needed to get Amazon sellers calling the FTC. I needed to make sure the FTC understood the scope and significance of what happened. I overcame my reluctance and told reporters about the FTC, and the topic once again blew up. Wall Street Journal, The Verge, Bloomberg, and several others. A lot of people were learning about the deal for the first time. More sellers came out of the woodwork, and I directed them to the FTC, which they had asked me to do. I routed them to the Facebook page, to reporters. Most people, though, were unwilling to go public, and some made me swear to secrecy. I've always found it strange that people won't speak up, even to save themselves. People can't conceive of positive change, yet they almost always believe that speaking out will have negative consequences. When the FTC chairman stated that they had been hearing from Amazon sellers and that sellers should keep it coming, I felt vindicated for my decision. Then he mentioned that he was willing to break up big tech if necessary. I hadn't even realized that was a possibility. In another unexpected move weeks later, the House Judiciary Committee announced an antitrust probe into Apple, Amazon, and others. The companies were sent public letters requesting information on an array of topics. At the bottom of the list was this line item asking for all communications to or from the relevant executives relating to the following: Apple's decision in 2018 to enter into agreement with Amazon to sell Apple products on Amazon and to limit the resellers that can sell Apple products on Amazon. Most exciting to me was the prospect of Amazon data being made public, because nobody actually knows how many sellers were affected. Is it hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands? Only Amazon knows the extent of its damage. The deadline for responding to the letters was a few months ago, and that brings us to today. The decision will supposedly be made in early 2020. And now we wait. So that's what happened, but what does it mean, and where's it going? First, why did the deal happen? We don't actually know. Neither Apple nor Amazon have explained beyond the initial email, but that doesn't stop people from having opinions. Some assume it's quality issues, but I don't think so. Here are some typical Amazon renewed sellers selling today. Many have mediocre feedback ratings and negative comments indicating the same old common problems. So quality wasn't improved. Frankly, if they were after quality, they would have kept me and so many other sellers. Some assume it's Amazon's problem with the so-called counterfeit items, but I don't think that's it either. There just isn't such a thing as a fake MacBook, at least to the degree there were issues on Amazon. As far as I can tell, the bulk of the counterfeit problem has to do with batteries and chargers sold individually, and there are still thousands of listings for non-OEM parts that could very easily be counterfeit or low quality. For the record, a distinction needs to be made between legitimate aftermarket parts and ones which impinge on trademarks and are legally counterfeit. The vagueness of the word counterfeit has allowed it to be used as a weapon against the legitimate aftermarket parts we need as refurbishers, but that's a topic for a different presentation. So anyway, not quality and not counterfeiting. What was it then? I'm no expert, but I believe Amazon is simply playing Monopoly, trading up from houses to hotels. It's easy to blame ourselves and wonder what we could have done better, but I believe the decision was made at a much higher level. Small sellers made Amazon a ton of money, but I think Amazon calculated that selling Apple directly gets them even more profit with less overhead. And it's hard to imagine Apple minds that use laptops were swept off half the internet. That's what I think, but it's also speculation. We weren't in the room when the deal was made, so we just don't know. So what's the impact? First off, people defend the deal by saying that a company has the right to choose its sellers. It's their company, they can do what they want. I generally agree, but the problem here is that Amazon is literally half the marketplace for all things sold on the internet. Amazon is half of our universe. So when a company this big makes what would ordinarily be a reasonable decision, well within its rights, small players get crushed and there's a tectonic shift in the landscape. When a company gets this big, it can't sneeze without causing someone damage. It starts to look like a monopolistic antitrust scenario. There's a legal concept called the first sale doctrine. This tells us we have the right to resell something we own. It's our property, and we have property rights. We can fix what we own, modify it, sell it, or smash it to pieces. An Apple laptop in our inventory is our property and our product, not Apple's property or Apple's product. To suggest it's Apple's product implies there are strings attached, and the first sale doctrine tells us that there aren't, for the most part. But when a manufacturer sells directly on Amazon, and you and I are prohibited from doing the same, we are effectively blocked from exercising our property rights on half the internet, half the playing field. This constitutes a legal circumvention of the first sale doctrine. The free and open internet, the land of possibility, shrinks. What's worse, Amazon proactively seeking a deal with a manufacturer likely set a precedent. Why stop with just one deal? A few months ago, Amazon sent an email to Nintendo Marketplace sellers announcing a restriction nearly identical to the Apple agreement. But instead of giving Nintendo sellers months to adjust, listings were deactivated almost immediately. Amazon announced the next day that this elaborate string of actions was simply an error and reinstated the listings. But the striking similarity to the Apple deal shows Amazon's hand. It reveals a cookie-cutter template for dumping marketplace sellers, and it's hard to believe they don't intend to use it again. As I mentioned previously, Apple sellers on the Walmart marketplace have been getting blocked, receiving emails like this one, starting rumors of a Walmart deal. When you think about it, why wouldn't every marketplace want a partnership with one of the biggest companies in the world? Once the avalanche of deals starts, companies may need to trade up to hotels just to stay competitive. eBay is historically pro-seller, but it's dwarfed by Amazon, only about 10% of the market, so what will it do when it feels the pain? What if all manufacturers and all marketplaces make deals? We and our first sale doctrine will be relegated to the black market. We'll be listing our inventory on Craigslist and meeting up with customers in Walmart parking lots. I agree that the biggest companies have rights, but don't we? This also affects consumer choice. Amazon only created renewed listings for newer, more expensive laptops, and the listings for affordable machines were deactivated when the sellers were dumped. A perfectly good $129 MacBook that ran the current OS and was a great deal for consumers, and available by the millions through recyclers, ceased to exist on half the internet overnight. Suddenly, the cheapest MacBook, in the eyes of everyone who looked, was around $349, not $129. This affects consumer choice by skewing our view of reality. This bans millions of cheap laptops from half the internet. This hurts consumers, refurbishers, recyclers, and the environment. This didn't help anyone, except, well, I'll let you guess who it helped. It gets worse. Most of the renewed listings do not state the year a MacBook was manufactured, but they do include a date first available field, which is the date the Amazon listing was created. I know from experience that consumers misinterpret this date as the model year of the computer. This confusing detail, intentional or not, leads consumers to believe, for example, that a 2012 MacBook Pro was manufactured in 2018. This may be a reason that many renewed MacBooks are actually selling for 20 to 30% more in 2020 than the identical laptops I sold in 2018. Something's not right here. Technology products going up in price over a year? So that's the damage, but what can we do about it? Well, we can live with the 50% we have left. As sellers, we can focus on other marketplaces. Several new ones have sprung up. We can focus on local markets. Many new local resources have come about as well. We can build our own websites, which is my preferred solution, to own my own marketplace and be truly independent. But it's incredibly hard to get visibility for a website, and Google has recently been denying small repair businesses the ability to buy ads. We can sell wholesale, but it's also very difficult to get established, and there's simply not room for everyone to sell wholesale. In short, we can wear blinders and compete for the scraps, but no matter how you look at it, the world is smaller. We've been squashed into the other 50% of the internet, and it's not as if that 50% is some kind of safe space. Another option is to regulate. It's government's job to be the referee in the game of capitalism. The FTC's actions are promising, and it will break up big tech if necessary, but if it does anything less, will a regulatory lasso around the pinky finger of these giants restrain monopolistic tendencies? Isn't it just a band-aid solution to think these massive companies can be kept from stomping on others, even as they grow multiple times bigger? If they are simply fined, aren't we just establishing the sale price for any given illegal action? Facebook was recently fined $5 billion, and we could practically hear their sigh of relief. France recently taxed Amazon, and Amazon simply increased fees to compensate for the tax. This company is practically a nation-state. Plus, as activist and author Cory Doctorow has pointed out, regulation tends to grant monopolies responsibilities normally reserved for government, effectively amounting to an endorsement and precluding the possibility that the companies could ever be broken up. No startup could ever afford to compete with that. It's why Mark Zuckerberg wants Facebook to be regulated, because although it may mean a few concessions, it officially cements his company into position. We can sue. I've been contacted by many lawyers doing research on behalf of their clients, but legal action is expensive and almost no seller can afford it. Plus, it takes years. There's class action, but in that case law firms pay for it themselves, so it will be a tough sell until they see more evidence that they can win. And not only that, but for a number of reasons, the Amazon situation may not technically comply with the requirements of a class action suit. And even worse, sellers have likely signed arbitration agreements with Amazon, which could mean they can't actually sue in the court system or take part in class action suits. It's a difficult legal situation, and it's been compared to an uncrackable Rubik's Cube. Some lawsuits focus on the manufacturers involved. Sellers claim that manufacturers use the Amazon brand registry program to prohibit them from legitimately selling a brand. Manufacturers often accuse sellers of listing counterfeits, but sellers argue they have legal and legitimate products, and in certain cases have even purchased the products directly from the manufacturer. The practice of requiring sellers to get approval to sell from a manufacturer is called brand gating, and it's practically an industry. Don't get me wrong, there's a very real counterfeiting problem that plagues brands and degrades brand integrity, but many believe the counterfeit claim is too often used as a mechanism to eliminate legitimate competition. We can break them up. People cringe at the thought of breaking up companies, as if it constitutes the death of the company, but there is a history of megacorporations being broken into component parts that live on. Some say it causes companies to thrive, compete, and get woken up from a state of complacency. Others claim it damages the free market and interferes with a system that would eventually correct itself. One of the more rational proposals I've heard is to split Amazon into two, a marketplace-only company and another where manufacturers sell. Perhaps this is the answer, since so many problems seemingly involve manufacturers preying on sellers, sharks swimming in the goldfish bowl, so to speak. Amazon itself is often accused of taking product ideas from its marketplace sellers, reproducing them on its own brand, and running sellers out of business by undercutting prices. I'm no expert and I don't know the answer. I'm just a guy who got caught up in all this. I'm sure there's damage involved when you break up companies, but what's worse, the damage caused by breaking them up or the damage caused by failing to act? We have antitrust laws on the books, and the law dictates that action be taken when the public interest is harmed, but the roadmap is murky, especially thanks to the internet age. In this brave new world, what constitutes precedence? What constitutes antitrust? What is the appropriate penalty? Should we treat the internet like a utility? How big is too big? Ultimately, I don't think we know any more than we can predict the next recession. Nobody knows, but we do know that Amazon is half of all things sold on the internet. 60% of American households have a Prime membership. Amazon Web Services is arguably the world's biggest cloud computing provider. What could possibly go wrong with one company owning the majority market share of so many parts of our lives? It's tempting to be cautious. A surgeon should know where to start cutting, after all. But when you know there's cancer, you have to take action. Here's the most important thing, at least in my eyes. Waiting is a form of recklessness because the severity of the problem only increases with time. If we don't enforce antitrust laws today, when will we? When Amazon is 3 times bigger? When manufacturer approval is required to sell anything on the internet and the first sale doctrine is truly dead? When there are no small businesses left to enrich our communities and act as vehicles for independence? When all used products are scrapped because corporations decide they shouldn't see the light of day? When the American dream is gasping its final breath? When we're at 70%, 80%, 90%, 98%? Or will we sit on our hands and wait until it's just too late? Thank you very much for listening to this. If you have been affected by any Amazon-related antitrust situation, please contact the FTC via the information on the screen. They will only know the scope of the problem if they hear your story, so it's very important that you tell it. Thank you very much.